Right, this video is going to be the build guide on how we put together the various elements of this MDF laser cut card kit. As you can see, spacious in terms of it being a big kit. You get a lot of buildings and corner ruins, and obviously you can build up some towers, enough to give cover to a warlord. And we're going to look at how all the parts go together. So let's jump over to the desk. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is sort parts into the 2mm MDF framework and the 0.6mm cladding. And you're going to want to get yourself some sort of part sorting tray or little pots, because what we're going to do is separate all the pieces, put them by their type before we start building. As you're going along, you want to punch out the little holes where the different pieces go. A biro is best for this. You can then just poke them through easily. Don't throw these little pieces away. They're great for making brick rubble, so stick them into the little pot as well. So we'll get on and do this. You'll notice that the frame is actually punched in a way that you really don't need a knife in order to separate the parts. They come out relatively easily. If you do get one or two stubborn ones, having a hobby knife that you can use on the back side, which is usually where it catches, to separate them. But other than that, most of the time, they just come apart like this. So let's sort all these. Right, so they're all nicely sorted. They didn't take too long at all, and this really helps with the construction stage, because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the main pillars. So you want to get these pieces that form the walls of the pillars. So we'll get a series of these, and I like to put a few on the table in front of myself. You're going to want some of these caps, and then some of these filler pieces. And next thing to get is a pot of PVA glue. I buy the construction grade stuff from the homeware store, but honestly any wood glue or decent quality non-school PVA glue will do the trick. And of course we need a sacrificial brush. This one's done many glues, and with having slightly stiffer bristles means that you kind of can get it where you need it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to put some glue in the middle of these, and you don't have to be overly neat with this because we'll tidy up at the end. I like to use a bit more glue and then clean down afterwards. It means it gets a really solid bond. So we put all those together like that. Then this little cross piece is going to go in between like that, and this just helps hold everything together and give you the shape of the pillar. So we'll do those four like that. And then what we're going to do is put some glue on the top, again in between the various connection parts like that. And then we're going to get this piece here, and that's going to sit on the top. So we're just going to push that so that it goes in between like that, and then just using our thumb and finger to squeeze the whole thing together to make sure it's nice and square, and this holds it in a square shape. And then there's another cross piece to put in the end here. So again, we're just going to put some glue in the joints like that, and then put another one of these cross pieces in there. And once you've got those at the top, middle and bottom, and you squeeze it together, the pieces will hold it in a square shape. And then you want to leave that set to one side to dry, and we're going to batch out a whole bunch of these, and that'll let us start constructing some walls. And after I've glued a couple together, what I like to do is go back to one of my earlier ones, take the excess glue off my brush, and just here where we've got some squeeze out, I just brush it up and down the joints. It doesn't matter at the moment if there's a little bit of extra glue on here like this, because all it's going to do is really kind of bind everything together into one solid piece. It does add a little bit of texture, but that's actually really going to help us in the painting stage. But don't have to worry about it too much. If you really do want it super smooth, a wet brush will make sure that there's no PVA left on the top surface. But now you can see we've got a nice single piece with no extra glue, but there's plenty in those joints to hold it all together firmly. Now we're going to do the short walls, which are done in a very similar way. So get a group of them together and then apply glue at the connection point, which is this little hole at the top here. So we're going to put, again, plenty of glue on and spread it down into the joints, and then join these together like this. And then we're putting some glue in these pieces here. You'll see it's the same design end as the larger pieces, and then we're just locating those little pins into the side piece there, squeezing everything together again, and then leaving it off to one side and do a clean up in a moment. Right, our next step is prepping the walls, and there are 3 different designs for these which you can pick and choose from. They're all the same size because the whole thing's modular, and there's a gate piece as well that's modular. We've got 5 pillars sitting here, so I'm going to go for one of each, and then we're going to cap
off with some ruined pieces as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these pieces, which are the bases that hold these, and we're going to glue them like this so that they sit nice and flat on the tabletop. But if you've got to stack them up between floors, there's a tab and a recess, holds everything nicely together when you're stacking things up to make it modular. For the ruined pieces, you're going to want to go for the one that's got the rounded end that matches up with the ruined section like that. And these are being done in a very similar way to the other one, where we are putting quite a generous amount of glue in the joint. Then we're putting the parts together and holding them in place. There's a little squeeze out, wipe off the excess glue, and I just run that down that join. Gets rid of all the extra glue that's not needed, but also forms a nice single bond all the way down there, and just pop that there to dry. And when it comes to doing the archway, you're going to want these little feet pieces, and they just go on the bottom of the arch here to give it some stability. And you want to make sure that the open piece is up against the wall joining section where it will contact the pillar, which you'll see in a sec. So it goes like that. Right, now we've got our various modules and components arranged, we're going to build what's essentially the classic corner ruin. We have a floor piece that's going to keep everything nicely aligned, and we're going to use these columns here. We're going to put these to the side for a second, we'll come back to those, and we're going to use these large ones first to do the ground and the first floor. So let's put these together now. All we're going to do is, again, take one element, put glue along the joining part, not worrying about being too neat and tidy. Then we're going to attach this. You'll see that there is a way up that this attaches. That piece goes at the bottom, joins it all up nicely together. You'll notice if you do it wrong, there'll be a gap at the bottom and a bit sticking out at the top. So that should hopefully help you make sure it's the right way round. And again, we're just going to push those together, and we're going to run the brush up and down in here to get rid of all of the excess and nicely bond everything together into one piece. I like to do it in subsections, so I'll leave that for a second. That would normally join with that, so I'll put one on the end of this. When they've had a minute or so for the glue to start to take and dry, then we'll put them all together. Right, and so then we're going to go on to the final assembly for the levels. So again, putting some glue in the joints and tidying it up as we go. Right, now that I've got those done, we're going to put some glue on the joins here, but also on the tops of these pillars, because the pillars will all line up with each other. So this way we get a nice strong bond between the floors, and when this glue all goes off, it'll help hold everything nice and rigid. Obviously a little wobbly at the moment because the glue is still drying, and I'm assembling this a little faster than I normally would. And these are going to go on top, making sure that we line up the pegs in the four below with the recess in the supporting wall above, and that will then hold everything nice and square. And everything is still wet, but you can see how it's held itself together nicely in this corner frame. And obviously there are a few bits where I need to just get in there and clean it up. But what we're going to do now, before we set it aside to dry, is we're going to get a floor piece. And a slight editorial note being added in here to say that actually the floor should be glued on after you've done the cladding, because there is a gap here which you can see, and that is to accommodate the cladding first. So you should put the cladding on the walls and then the floors on afterwards. They sit up against the cladding, and that way everything will be perfectly aligned and there'll be no gaps. And when you get the frame, you'll notice that the floor pieces are reversed. There's a left hand and a right hand one, so just make sure you pick the one that matches the shape of the corner ruin that you're making. And then what you want to do is you want to get some glue and go along the line of the little parapet that's in here that forms a little shelf that the floor sits on. So we're just going to put glue all in there, getting it right into the corner so that it's on both sides of the wall, and that will nicely hold the floor piece, which has been cut to fit around the shape of the pillars like this. And then set that aside with maybe something on the corner, a pot of paint or something, just to hold it down. But there is going to make you a nice corner ruin there. We do have these little spots here where I put glue on top, and what that is there for, and we'll just refresh it with a little glue because it dries very quickly on the MDF, is we get our pots of broken bricks that came in between all the different parts on the sprue, and we just put some on the wall and leave those to dry. When everything is finished and dried, I'll probably put a little bit of watered down PVA glue on there to bind those together, but it just adds a nice little bit of rubble and breaks up the top. Now, after this is dried, we'll put the top wall on here. And the top wall is made of these shorter columns that we glued up earlier, along with these decorative pieces here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these joints here and we're going to glue the decorative piece on like we did for the previous floor. Once you've done that, the tabs are going to go into the slots on here, and then this is going to sit on top of the whole assembly like this. So I'll just get this glued up, and then this will just sit on top of here again, located on that pin to hold everything in place. And I'll just push this down and give that a second to dry, and then I'll show you the whole building. Right, and there we can see that although obviously the glue is still wet, the great thing about PVA and MDF is that it starts to take very, very quickly. What I would do before we do any of the detailing part is I would leave this to the side, maybe an hour or so, for the glue to really firm up a lot, and then when we come to put all the decorative buttress pieces on, everything should be nice and stable for handling. Right, in the interest of getting this video done, I am not following my own advice and waiting until everything is firmly dry. But we're going to look at the detailing parts now. So the first thing we're going to do is put all the buttresses on. So we have two pieces for this. We have the bottom piece that flares out like this, that goes on the ground floor. And then we have the plain pieces, they will go around the second floor. And when it comes to doing the top as well, this shorter, thinner piece is the pillar work that goes on the top wall here. So all we've got to do in the case of working with these is to put some glue on the various bits and pieces. So I'm going to put them in this joins here again, and then these just slot really nicely into these little tabs that are here, and that will go all the way around any of the outside exposed holes here to add a bit of detail, and there'll be a couple on the inside to do as well. And that way you form your inner and outer corners without having to have the pieces designed that way. You can build it absolutely how you like. So I will just go round now, add those buttresses there, the plain ones on here. With the plain ones, make sure when you're putting them on there's a right way and a wrong way. You'll notice the right way is really easy to see because the longer piece then joins with the buttress piece below like that. And this way, when all your glue is dried, you get a nice column piece running all the way down here, which when we go to the painting stage in the second video, you'll see that these recesses pick up the paint really, really nicely and give you great shading that makes it so much more interesting than just a plain facade. So I will normally go round now and apply all these, but we'll move on to putting the cladding on so I can finish up the video, and then I'll finish this whole piece and I'll show you some other arrangements that I've managed to do with the parts. So let's now look at the thinner sheet for all the cladding. Right, so it's just a case of making sure you get the right cladding for the right section. You'll notice that this piece here has no hole in it here. That's intended for this segment that has the eagle detail in the middle. So that fits in the recess like that. And we'll just put some glue, and that gives it a nice 3D detailing here. You get these nice high Gothic arches go around this row of windows here, and then the piece that I haven't actually used on this ruin is the piece with the circular window, and that has this circular piece here that will go in there like that, and everything lines up nicely to give you some extra detail. So what we'll do is we'll just pop a little bit of glue on the facade. It helps here if you thin your glue ever so slightly, and I really do mean ever so slightly. What I tend to do is just wet my brush so that when I put it into the glue it adds a little bit of moisture but not too much, and you want to spread that around without putting too much in there, because here squeeze out is a little harder to solve. So we'll just make sure you've got a nice, you can see from the shine of this, they've got a nice coating. You want to do one panel at a time so the glue doesn't dry up, and then this just literally drops in there. I tend to do bottom first and then top like that. If you're having some issues with the corners, back of your paintbrush is your friend here, because you can just use it to push in there like that. And then if you leave that nicely like that for an hour or two, it will dry fully. Here we can tidy up any glue we've got around the windows, which is why it's nice to have it thin. It doesn't get too messy, and that adds a nice level of detail. There are enough pieces on the framework that you can do both sides of here. The ruined one works like that or like that, so it's completely reversible to match the ruined window, and then the archway pieces go in like this here. So what I'll do is I'll go around and do a few more of these after I finish recording, but before we get that far we've also got to do the top wall. So you want these longer pieces, punch out the circle pieces, you can keep these for some detailing elsewhere if you want to, always handy to have. And again, slightly thinned with a wet brush, we're going to apply this over the wall piece here and then just drop it on so that the slightly crenellated top lines up like that. And then for when you've done this all the way around, that's your building fully detailed, and there should be plenty of parts. The kit includes 40 of these columns and 20 of the top columns, so you can make quite the arrangement of buildings. I will now grab the ones off my other part of the desk and we'll look at different ways to lay them out to make the most of the modularity. Yeah, I've grabbed these to show the different ways you can do this. You can make the corners both inner corners, an outer corner like this, or an inner corner like this. You can create some really interesting shapes by having some really intact parts like this and then combining the ruins elsewhere. As mentioned, the detailing covers both elements. This is my test kit. There are a few inconsistencies that you can ignore. They're not there on the full kit. It's just there to show you that this could be building oriented either way round, and it adds something really interesting. Troops can get up on these. You can see they're quite a large space. This is like a 50 mil square area here, so you can put troops up on the buildings. And this one again shows that you can have the corner go one way and then the other. And these pillars add a nice little bit of extra detail here. Obviously I was still in the middle of building some. You could of course stack this up further and further if you want to, have a double height, quadruple height. You just obviously just keep going with the floors like that, up as high as you like. You could build some nice square towers either side of a gate entrance. Lots of different coordinated ways of doing this. So this is how you build the kit, and we will be moving on in the next video to how I did this painting. Nothing fancy will be used in there. It will just be a rattle can, some paints and a sponge, and some weathering work. Nice and easy to get your Titanicus or Legion Imperialis or any other 6 to 10 mil game terrain on the tabletop nice and fast.